We're going to travel back to the Ming Dynasty in ancient China to learn about a mighty, powerful emperor who was actually kind of little. I'm talking about an actual child emperor ruling across the land. Imagine getting a babysitter for someone who didn't quite know how to tie his shoes, but was also about to be in charge of the whole nation. Welcome back to Nutty History. Today, we'll be exploring the escapades of a child emperor. From the zoo to women, Zeng-dee, Emperor of China, felt the weight of being in charge, but would rather enjoy life. Let's get started. Right around the time of the European Renaissance across the world, future ruler Zhu Hozhao was born in 1491. He would go on to become one of the most controversial and irresponsible figures in ancient China and around the world. Interestingly, he is the only child of the great Hongxi Emperor Zhu Yousheng. Emperor Zhu was known as the only monarch in ancient China that had a strictly monogamous relationship, meaning little Zhu Hozhao was the sole heir to the throne. When Zhu Hozhao was born, he was given the title of Crown Prince of the Ming Empire. He had a lot of weight on his shoulders, but despite this, he had a happy upbringing. His parents were happy together and loved their little boy. Zhu Hozhao was said to have had both royal honor and was genuinely happy. He is thought to be one of the happiest crown princes in the history of China. With all the resources available to him, Zhu Hozhao grew to become an intelligent but mischievous kid. It is believed that Zhu Hozhao enjoyed studying Confucian teachings and became well-versed. Most ministers thought he would grow to become a great emperor. He was applauded across the land for his dedication to education. Tragedy struck at age 14 when his father passed away. Suddenly, the entire empire was Zhu Hozhao's to rule. Of course, he had some prime ministers and advisors to support him. Being the same as most teenagers, Zhengde Emperor simply thought he had better things to do than rule an empire. He would frequently listen to the servants around him instead of the well-educated advisors. The ministers urged Zhu Hozhao to be in the palace and learn his role as emperor, but he wanted to do other things. Zhu Hozhao was grateful that his father was so efficient and created a self-sustaining government, as Zhu Hozhao was often absent from meetings and important functions. His advisors kept trying to persuade the young Zhengde Emperor to be more involved. Instead, Zhengde chose talented officials to do the administrative work for him. Zhengde Emperor would often swoop in when an important decision needed to be made. Despite his absences, Zhengde Emperor was often applauded for making the right decisions. Now, while he may not have been interested in running the empire, he was interested in women. Zhengde Emperor surrounded himself with women whenever he could. At times, his harem of women was so large that there wasn't enough food or supplies to sustain them, and many died. This all became one step worse when the emperor visited the imperial zoo. The zoo was located outside the Forbidden City and known as Baofeng, or the leopard's chambers. He was fascinated by the process of taming a wild animal and would frequently visit the leopards, tigers, and elephants. He instructed his staff to expand the grounds of the zoo and build additional houses for his harem of women. Zhengde Emperor moved from the palace to his newly built mansion with the intent of living, working, and enjoyment. His mansion of women must have not been enough, as he was known to frequent brothels in the area as well. Zhengde Emperor really enjoyed being out amongst the civilians. He would frequently walk around the city, visiting various shops and businesses. He wanted to travel further south, but his advisors rejected this idea. Zhengde Emperor was not pleased and did not want to feel trapped inside his palace. Instead, he instructed his staff to build a business street inside the palace walls. He instructed servants and maids to act as retailers, complete with uniforms. It had an eerily empty feel to it, and it was built for the enjoyment of only one person, Emperor Zhengde. The staff would be dressed up as merchants and commoners. The emperor would wander around his fake town, visiting the shops and restaurants, and pretend he was merely a civilian going about his day. To top it all off, any staff that didn't want to participate in the charade would be punished and quickly fired from the imperial court. His desire for women was not enough, and he wanted to take more risks. The emperor was known to be irresponsible. He had a very luxurious lifestyle and wanted to keep up appearances. The emperor enjoyed hunting tigers all throughout China. There was one unfortunate incident where the emperor had a rather close run-in with a tiger. He was so badly mauled and injured that he could not appear in the imperial court for a month and instead spent the time healing. In another incident, the emperor decided to store the extra gunpowder inside the palace during the Lantern Festival. Now, if you've ever been to or seen pictures of a lantern festival, then you know there are lots of things on fire. Of course, his decision to store the gunpowder ended poorly. Not before long, his majestic palace went up in flames and burned to the ground. Years into his reign, news traveled throughout the empire that the Lord of Tatar Mongols was advancing through the land. He was a powerful military man who had united many clans along the way. The Lord was getting close to the Ming's border and causing destruction to the empire. Zhengde Emperor started to plan his attack and wanted to lead the army himself. His advisors very strongly disagreed, as previous emperors were ill-fated when put against a nomadic lord. Knowing he didn't have the support of the officials, Zhengde Emperor brought a few imperial guards with him and escaped the city in the dark of night. General Zhang Qin had blocked an important pass and persuaded the emperor to head back to the safety of the city. Zhengde Emperor went to a nearby village and hid. He had informants watching General Zhang Qin's movements, and when the general had moved from his post, the emperor made the move and reached the northern borders. Wanting to feel emboldened in his military trials, the emperor gave himself a new name. When performing military duties, he was to be addressed as Grand Marshal Zhu Shou. The title came with a new additional salary. Technically, a Grand Marshal is ranked below the emperor. He would be the first and only emperor of China that bestowed himself a new, lesser title. It was during this escape to the northern borders that the emperor got to live out his fantasies as Grand Marshal and tour the north. His ministers kept sending him messages to return home the whole time he was taking in the sights of the north. Now that he had a taste of outside life, he wanted to visit the south. A few years later, led by a rebel king, an army 100,000 strong was gaining power. Zhengde Emperor was once again excited at the prospect of battle. The impressively strong army was headed towards China's south, and the emperor wanted to use this as a reason to tour the south. Soon after he left the city and embarked towards the south, a talented minister named Wang Shoren already defeated the entire army. Not to let this detour his travels, the emperor continued to the south, tried to assist, and defeated the rebel king. Again, along his journeys, he loved to live out his other fantasy, living as a civilian. He liked to fish during these trips and would often try to sell his fish to eunuchs and guards along the way. On his way to the imperial palace in 1520, Zhengde Emperor was on a riverboat taking in the views. Historians believe that he was drinking heavily on the boat and fell into the lake. The emperor almost drowned. Though he survived the initial incident, he contracted a waterborne illness and died the following year. He had no sons, and the empire was passed along to his cousin, Zhu Hozong. Even though Zhengde Emperor had many side trips and selfish ambitions, he is remembered as a good emperor. When he was present for his duties, he did make good decisions that helped advance China's economy and people. Fortunately for Emperor Zhengde, he had such a high-quality imperial court that allowed him to behave in such an irresponsible way. Some believe he was simply a playful and curious man who preferred being a civilian than an emperor, while others see him as an irresponsible, senseless emperor. Zhengde Emperor led a colorful and eventful life in his short time on Earth. He made a positive impact on China, and at the very least, left those around him with many stories to tell. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Nutty History. Don't forget to like and subscribe.